one of Pixar's best sequels in quite some time. Probably since Toy Story 4, which I also really like. But yeah, if you love the first Inside Out, you're probably going to really enjoy the sequel. I certainly did. And I imagine, this movie is now the highest grossing film of the year so far. It's made over $1 billion. So you bet your bottoms that they're going to make a third film. And we could potentially have another amazing Pixar trilogy, which I would love that, because really the only other amazing Pixar trilogy, at least right now, is Toy Story. And I would even argue quadrilogy personally, because I love Toy Story 4, despite my initial misgivings of that movie. But now, my friends, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the best movies of 2024 so far. I've seen a lot of movies this year, and I'm glad I've been able to, both bad and good. I've been able to produce a lot of content for you guys, and I sure do hope you've enjoyed all these reviews, and also great hearing your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts throughout this conversation, this presentation as well. And again, I've seen good movies, great movies, excellent films, and bad movies. Downright garbage films. But for right now, for today, I just want to talk about the best movies of 2024. Again, so far. It's crazy that we're already at the halfway point of this year, but we still have another 6 months of entertainment, of films, not only in movies, of course, but also in television, in video games, and books, and comics. So many things I want to eventually cover by the end of the year. But we'll start simply with movies. And, briefly before getting into my top 10, I have created a top 10 list so far, though it could change. It was just how I was feeling, over the past, couple days. So these might switch by the end of the year. One might go over the other, or maybe one would eventually leave my list depending on the additional movies I see. But I did want to go ahead and I want to start with some honorable mentions. I have 5 or 6 honorable mentions or something like that. Probably even more. I didn't count them. But the first one I wanted to start with, and these aren't in any particular order, at least for the moment. But one of the first ones I wanted to mention was Abigail, which was a really entertaining horror comedy film directed by Radio Silence, who are probably best known for other horror comedies like Ready or Not, which was a fantastic film that came out in the late 2010s. And more recently, they've worked on and been behind the recent Scream films, both Scream 5 and Scream 6. So they're not coming back for the next Scream for a variety of reasons, which we won't go into here, but this is a really slick film. It's mostly a bottle movie. It follows just a group of fairly nefarious characters from all different walks of life, basically kidnapping this young girl, bring her to this mansion, and waiting until they're paid by her incredibly rich father. Well, turns out, as indicated in the trailers, that she's actually a vampire, and she begins picking off many of her kidnappers one by one. And there's some additional reveals along the way. But I just really like this movie for its cast. A great cast of Melissa Barrera, who again was previously in Radio Silence's two Scream movies. She played one of the Carpenter sisters. You have Dan Stevens. You guys know I'm a huge Dan Stevens fan. He's my imaginary boyfriend. You also have a great performance by Catherine Newton. Kevin Durant's in it, who's also one of my other favorite movies this year. One of the last performances from Angus Cloud, who I believe passed away very recently, and Giancarlo Esposito. And again, they play a variety of characters, some more morally reprehensible than others. But it creates an interesting dynamic because they don't all trust another, but they have to deal with this threat, this creature, this little dancing ballerina vampire who has incredible strength and is able to do horrible things to them and turn them into vampires and things. And I love the environment this movie takes place in. It's kind of like watching the film, and I said this during my initial review, the mansion reminded me of the mansion in Resident Evil 1. It was like, this is what it's supposed to look like. Just do this. And you can have the weird, gross basement room. This movie is very gross. It's very moist. Everything, there's goop and gunk and vomit and shit and diarrhea and it's just gross, right? And I love it. I love how gross it looks and just scummy and scuzzy. And there's all these different types of rooms where you have this opulence, this kind of old opulence and, gilded walls and things. But then you go in the basement, it's just fucking gore pits everywhere, right? And I loved it for that. My biggest criticism of the movie, it's not really the movie itself, but it's the marketing of the film. Because they revealed in the trailers that the little girl was a vampire. And that comes a good long while into the movie. You don't really know what's happening. It's a bit of a mystery. And then it's like, oh, shit, you kind of spoiled in the trailer. And there's an additional reveal later on. But at the same time, it's like, man, I've said this before, but it makes me wish that the filmmakers, the directors, the writers, or whoever, they have more control over the marketing, or at least what is shown in the trailers, the scenes. I don't understand why they just have these trailer houses that put together these things and they just inevitably reveal too much. And sometimes they just tell the whole movie. It's like, I really wish they wouldn't do that. So I don't know why that just has always seemed to be the case. It's frustrating. But despite, going in knowing what the little girl was. And the little girl, by the way, Alicia Weir, she does a great job. She's having a lot of fun with this role. I think people have kind of favorably compared her to like Kristen Dunst in Interview with a Vampire, although certainly more active and rabid and seemingly crazy. But I ended up really liking this movie. I think it's a very fun horror comedy film. And, moving on to just a comedy or, a buddy cop action comedy, Bad Boys Ride or Die. Which is the fourth entry in the franchise. I wish they would have just called this Bad Boys for Life. I mean, marketing would be perfect for it, but that was what the last movie was called, so they couldn't call it that. And they bring back the original directors from that third movie, which is still my favorite. Adil and Bilal, I think that's how you say they pronounce their names. But yeah, they did the third film, which was very good. Still my favorite Bad Boys, but this is also very good too. I did like this. Again, the chemistry between Will Smith and Martin Lawrence as the respective characters, I think, is great. They're at very different points in their lives. They're much older than they were back in the day, all the way back in 1995 and 2001 when the sequel came out. And I like that that's incorporated into the movie itself. It makes it interesting. Their kind of dynamics change with one another. Now, not all the comedy is consistent. There are some scenes where, okay, this joke is going on for too long. This bit's not really working. This gag's not really working. That's there in the movie. Although, to be fair, I think that's across the franchise. Although I don't think it's as consistently funny as the third movie. They still have some really good gags in the film. I actually ended up really enjoying the action quite a bit, especially in the third act. It's interesting to see how this franchise experimented with action because, of course, it started with Michael Bay, the big bombastic explosions, wide shots and stuff. Like these filmmakers, they're incorporating like a lot of like interesting perspectives, like gun perspectives, like first-person guns perspective. Like one character throws the gun to them, but it's from the perspective of the gun. They grab it and then they shoot. It's like that's interesting. A lot of drone stuff in this, and we're getting a big sense of like these battles as they're taking place. The choreography is very well done, and you buy that, these actors, because the choreography is so great. You buy that they're able to do all these things. Even Martin Lawrence, who definitely is. I mean, even Will Smith, he's moving a little slower, but especially Martin Lawrence. But it's still fun. And the third act is really a highlight of the movie, where it all takes place at an alligator farm, and there's some great comedic sequences there, some great action. People getting munched on by gators. You guys know I love some good gator violence, chat. Got to spec that gator, and I spec this movie. This was a very fun film, and Reggie, the actor who plays Reggie, Martin Lawrence's son-in-law, he has several scene-stealing moments. He's great. He's great, and they've just. You want to see him more and more and more in these movies, and if they're going to make another one, which I'm sure they will, since this was a pretty big commercial success, and critically, I think it did fairly well too. Again, I don't think as good as the third one, but still good. I want to see more of him, but very, very, very fun. Very good action movie. And speaking of other action movies, this one's been forgotten, but I really like it. Boy Kills World, which is takes place in this dystopian world. I mean, it's kind of wearing its influences on its sleeve to a certain extent. A little bit of Battle Royale, a little bit of the Hunger Games. They're all taken from each other, But you follow Bill Skarsgård, who lives in this world, whose family seemingly is killed, and he's raised by, I mean, we've seen this kind of story before. He's raised by this, old Asian master who makes him this mixed martial arts professional, and he is basically going around and trying to kill the members of this family that rule this city, that set up this event, which is basically the culling, of all these. It's Hunger Games, it's Battle Royale, right? And he participates in it, of course. And the action sequences are great. Wonderful choreography. It's very bloody. It's very gory. It's over the top. One of the things that I think stands out about the film that really worked for me is that Bill Skarsgård, he is mute and he is deaf, but his inner voice is not Bill Skarsgård's voice. It's actually the voice of H. John Benjamin, who's probably best known for playing characters like, Archer in the series Archer, or Bob Belcher in Bob's Burgers. And that creates some pretty entertaining comedic sequences. There's a few little twists and turns in the movie that I think are very fun. But yeah, if you just want to go into a movie with some really cool action, I think some really solid comedy, I think you'll end up liking this film. I think I like this movie more than most people that saw it, and very few people saw it. I think it's going to kind of become like a cult classic. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I mean, you have a number of other recognizable actors who show up for a bit: Sharlto Copley, Famke Johnson, a couple other character actors as well, and they do a good job for what they're given. Moving on to one of the most successful movies so far of 2024, Godzilla x Kong: Wakanda Forever, the new Empire. Of course, you have Adam Wingard, who returns to direct this film, who previously did Godzilla vs. Kong, which I ended up really enjoying. That was the last entry in the MonsterVerse series. And with this one, he kind of doubles down everything that I enjoyed about Godzilla vs. Kong. At least some of the stuff that I felt worked. He's definitely embracing not so much the darker tone of the previous movie, certainly not the first one. Instead, he seems to be inspired by the middle and later Showa era Godzilla movies. Very goofy, kind of over the top, big colorful monster battles. It's like everything's neon in this film. Why is it neon? It doesn't matter because it just looks really good. It's got a very synthy score, and you got Godzilla and you got Kong. Yes, they throw down, they battle each other. Kong kind of freaks out about that, but it's just them teaming up and fighting, basically an ice Godzilla and a really just scuzzy looking orangutan kaiju. And, kaiju hijinks ensue. And it's fun. It's very fun. There's some great moments in the movie that I don't want to spoil for people who haven't seen it. Khan, I think it's very smart that they led with Khan being the lead of this movie and just being the lead of the MonsterVerse, because I think you just can do more with him, and that's the case. Sadly, Adam Wingard and Legendary, they're unable to do certain things with Godzilla. They can't humanize him so much because of Toho, which I wish that's like you can have all these different versions of Godzilla. Like I think you can have Godzilla and Khan, the new Empire, and you can have Godzilla -1. We can see different iterations on these notable kaiju, but whatever. It is what it is. I think the movie does have issues. I think the characters, yes, they don't have a lot of depth. They're not very interesting. Some know what they're in. Dan Stevens, he's like, I'm just hanging out with my buddy Adam Wingard, who, of course, they work together on The Guest, which is an amazing thriller from the 2010s. I recommend people checking out. Wonderful movie. But the character work is not great. I wish they would punch up their stuff a little bit better. They do have occasionally some good moments, some fun moments, some surprising moments, but yeah, it's the weakest aspect of the movie. But if you want to go in there for monster battles, you want to go in there for spectacle, you want a great look, a great score, this movie delivers that. It's a very fun film. I like it, nearly as much as Godzilla vs. Kong. A lot to appreciate about the movie. Speaking of giant monsters, chat, we also have Sting. I do love creature features, as you guys know. I love killer animal movies and giant killer animal movies. Thank you very much. I almost gave something away about the movie. I didn't want to do that, but we got a good old giant killer animal movie, a giant spider in this case, and it's just this little weird girl, Little Furiosa, the same actress that plays Little Furiosa. In Furiosa Mad Max saga shows up here. She's just this little weird girl who lives in an apartment complex with her family. She's got a stepdad, and he's trying to bond with her, and he's kind of struggling with that. But she's a little weirdo, and she likes collecting insects and shit. And he collects this spider, and she names him Sting. And little Sting has a few odd things about him, and he grows to enormous size and just begins webbing up and sucking out the goop and eating all of the various tenants of the apartment complex, and people have to try to survive and battle against Sting. It's a fun movie. There's a lot of good gory sequences here. Like, if you have issues of spiders, looking at you, Katria, this is not the movie for you. This spider does some fucked up shit. It's going inside of people. It's eating people from the inside out. You see it popping, and people going, "Ah!" It's gross. Eggs. It's gross and disgusting. It does what a creature feature needs to do, and I really liked it for that. I appreciate it for that. It's a fun film. And the last of my honorable mentions, chat, and this is a movie that people are saying, "Well, Chris, you're going to hate this movie because it stars this actor, and you hate this actor." And it's The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Well, guess what? I actually like this movie. And, of course, the actor that people are referring to, that everyone says I hate, I don't hate him. I'm not the biggest fan of him, perhaps. I don't hate the person. But that's Henry Cavill. And Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, it's loosely, an emphasis on the word loosely, based on real-life events. And also a book about Operation Postmaster, where you had these various figures from a bit of a dubious past that were sent to the Mediterranean to basically attack and board and basically be pirateers and try to disrupt Italian and German navies. And you have a solid cast of people, though certain people get more to do than others. The standouts are Henry Cavill, who is the lead in the film, Isaac Gonzalez, who I think is also quite good, and Alan Ritchson. And anytime they're on screen with each other, the three of them, they have really good chemistry. And it's just them. It's just Guy Ritchie. Guy Ritchie directed the film, and it's just him doing his own version of Inglourious Basterds. Is it as good as Inglourious Basterds? No, it's not. But a lot of it does work. There's some very well-crafted action sequences. And I think Henry Cavill gives one of the best performances of his entire career. A lot of people say he was good in this, he was good in that. For me, he brings a lot of personality to this, and it looks like he's having a lot of fun. When he's very over-exaggerated, I think that really works. I think so often he's always played these like very reserved characters, and I would honestly just want him to be kind of more over the top and zany. Just do that more, because it was like, oh shit, now I can kind of see what a lot of people see in him. But it was again another kind of underappreciated movie that not a lot of people saw, but I had fun with it. It was a nice little war comedy, chat. Had a lot going on. But now, that was just my honorable mentions, chat. We got to go ahead, and we got to move on to my top 10 best movies, favorite movies of 2024 so far. And let's start with number 10. Oh, shit. I got rid of the placeholder. But let's go ahead and start with number 10. And number 10, I have Love Lies Bleeding. And this is directed by Rose Glass. This is her second feature film, I want to say. And it has a cast that includes Kristen Stewart, Katie O'Brien, Jenna Malone, Dave Franco, and Ed Harris. And this is a really cool, dirty, gritty, nasty crime thriller. It's set in the late 80s, I think like 88 or 89 or something. And you follow this couple, this lesbian couple played by Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien. Kristen Stewart, she's a member of this kind of like crime family in the area, and she operates this gym, and she becomes infatuated with a bodybuilder played by Katie O'Brien. You might have seen Katie O'Brien a couple things. She's been The Mandalorian. She's in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. She plays one of the little mini people, the little mini Lilliputians, whatever the hell they're called in that movie. And they start a relationship, but because she's in this crime family, or he's associated with them, things get out of control, and they wind up trying to get out of the situation as best as they possibly can. A lot of people end up dying. There's a lot of, gross, grisly murders in this movie that worked really well for me. Anya Barishkanov, I should have mentioned her initially as being part of the main cast. She gives a fantastic supporting performance as someone who is obsessed with Kristen Stewart's character and does not like that she has affections for this new person and causes a lot of mischief and chaos throughout the entire movie. Dave Franco. Not James Franco. He ain't showing up anything anytime soon. But Dave Franco, he plays very much against type, and he's playing like this really scummy character, this very abusive husband in the film. And Ed Harris is consistently great. If I have any criticisms of the movie, it's like Kristen Stewart, she plays one thing, which is kind of disaffected, just aloofness to like everything, just like, all right, whatever, it's kind of like her standard mode. But she is good here, and she has chemistry with Katie O'Brien. I buy into their relationship. It does work for me. Other than that, there are like kind of these weird, trippy dream-esque sequences, or like you don't know if it's actually happening at first, and then like the movie ends with one of those sequences. Is like, wait, what? It was kind of odd. But despite how mixed I am on the ending and some of the weird kind of trippy sequences, if you are a fan of like just gritty, grimy crime thrillers, if you're a fan of maybe like Coen Brothers, some of their earlier movies, then I think this might be up your alley. There's a lot of great stuff here, and it makes me want to see more of the cast, including Katie O'Brien and things, and definitely Anya Barishkanov. I think they're two of the biggest standouts in this entire film. And also I want to see more from Rose Glass. But moving on from number 10, chat, my 9th best movie of 2024, I have Out of Darkness. Now, technically, this movie was made in 2022, but it was released very, very early in 2024. I want to say like January and something. Yeah, it was like January. And for those that don't know, it's a horror film, a horror survivalist film, and it takes place like 45,000 years ago. And you're following this tribe of humans, these 6 humans who arrive on the shore of this new land, and they're just searching for better life because their whole life was just miserable. You have the group leader, right? You got his mate who's pregnant. You got some other people that have joined them as well, and some people that have not been tied to the family but are just there because they just want to also just get away from wherever they previously were. And they start living on this land, but then they realize something else is here, something they haven't encountered before, and slowly, one by one, they're all picked off in pretty graphic fashion, brutal fashion. And I ended up really liking this movie. It's completely subtitled. They're speaking a fictitious language that was created for the film itself. But I love the way this movie looks. I mean, they definitely captured. It's directed by Andrew Cummings, by the way. It's their feature-length film. But they just captured the look of a primeval world. And I think a lot of this was maybe shot in Ireland or something. It was definitely in the UK. It just had that look to it. It's like, I love that they shot on location. That really helps immerse you in the movie, just how harsh this existence was for our early ancestors, thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of years ago. The lighting in the movie is great. The use of darkness is wonderful. Like, because these people, they can make fire, but then you have these wonderful shots where they just pull the camera back, and it's just, you just see their little fire, and there's darkness all around them in these huge forests and things. It's really cool. It's really interesting. There is a twist as to like what's actually going on. What are these creatures? Are there something else? Are they that? That's revealed in the movie, and it really worked for me. It was a movie that not a lot of people were able to, or just a lot of people didn't see or didn't even know about, but it's one I recommend. I think if you love like those old like 70s, 80s, or maybe even 60s like Neolithic movies, like The Quest for Fire or 10 Million BC, stuff like that, and you're like, I want to see one of those movies again, then this might scratch that itch. It's got a lot going for it. I want to see more from this director too. They did a very good job. But moving on from number 9, my 8th favorite movie of 2024, at least so far, is Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga. Of course, this is the prequel spinoff to Mad Max Fury Road. So apparently this movie was supposed to like come out very soon after Fury Road, but because there was just a lot of issues that George Miller had with Warner Bros, ended up suing them. That delayed the production 9 years later. So we're getting this movie nearly a decade later. And as I said before, it's a prequel spinoff. And instead of focusing on Mad Max, we focus on the character Furiosa, who was, in my opinion, the standout character of Fury Road. She was kind of the lead, since based on the way that Tom Hardy was acting during production, and he refused to say so much of his dialogue. George Miller instead decided to give it to the character Furiosa, played by Charlize Theron. And she stood out, and she was great. Love what they ended up doing with her. And Fury Road was a great movie, despite Tom Hardy just not wanting to really participate for whatever reason. And so I was interested in this film. Like, okay, let's go. I want to learn more about this character, and I think it would be a cool way to kind of expand the world. And I think for the most part, George Miller succeeds. Instead of Charlize Theron returning, we have Anya Taylor-Joy, who I think does a great job. Also, the young actress from Sting plays her younger version, and she's also very good in the movie too. But it just delivers more of that crazy, over the top, post-apocalyptic world that some people loved about Fury Road. All these different little civilizations and cultures spring up, all their little traditions. Like, it's very interesting. And we're also introduced to a new villain played by Chris Hemsworth. I just want to see Chris Hemsworth play villains. Because before, I forget if it was before or after I seen this movie, but I'd also watched Bad Times at El Royale, and he was so good in that movie. He was like one of the standouts. It was like, oh man. I mean, people know he's played Thor. He's played a lot of heroic characters throughout his career, but seeing him stretch himself and being very over the top in a very nefarious way, I was like, oh wow, I want to see more of this. And if you liked him in Bad Times at El Royale, then I think you'll really like him as Lord Dementus in this movie, who is the cause of so much childhood trauma and misfortune for Furiosa. He gives the best performance in the movie. He's one of my favorite Mad Max villains. Just one of my favorite performances of the year so far. Like, he fucking just completely embraced the zaniness, the pure mayhem of this world, this warlord. Another thing I liked about him too, he's not even like, you think, oh, well, they got to up the threat. They got to, it's got to keep increasing. We go from Toe Cutter to Lord Humongous, and we go from Lord Humongous, we go to Anti-Entity, we go to Entity, we go Morton Joe. It's like with him, he's not the most powerful warlord at all. And he knows that. And so he's just trying to manipulate and worm his way into like all these different places to gain control. And you have all these people that just fucking hate him for it, And he's incredibly flawed. There's some tragedy to his character as well. We learn about his backstory as to, why he became what he became, uses an excuse. But yeah, I really ended up liking him quite a bit. If I have any... Now, there are some great action sequences in this film, there's no doubt. But I have one big criticism of the movie, and that is the use of CGI and the green screen. It is very noticeable. That's not to say that Fury Road never had any CGI. It was all, practical effects. No. Fury Road has CGI. And, I'm able to point out, and I think a lot of us are able to point out too, but it assisted the practical scenes themselves. And so it didn't feel noticeable most of the time. There's a couple of sequences like, you need to do that, like the thing with the wheel coming at us. Come on. This movie, it's like this is shot on a green screen, on a set. Like, occasionally it feels like, okay, they're shooting like outside, but there's other times where it's like, God, it's just, I just wish they were able to shoot outside and capture that feel of, at the very least, of Fury Road, or what I would even love even more, like the feel of the original trilogy, which was shot on location and felt very dirty and gritty and just captured what that post-apocalyptic world would probably feel like, as they're all fighting over gasoline and hot leather. So that's the one thing that really stood out to me that bothered me. But despite that, I think it's a very entertaining movie, and you have a number, and of course you see more about Immortan Joe and his family and the history of this world, and I think those actors, obviously Hugh Keays-Byrne does not reprise his role, sadly he had passed away, but the actor they get to play Immortan Joe, I think, does a great job. So if you really enjoyed Fury Road and you just want to see more of that world, but also, get some good action sequences in there, then I think you're going to probably really enjoy Furiosa, despite some CGI that doesn't really work. And a wonderful performance by Chris Hemsworth, who is the big standout for me, as Lord Dementus. But moving on from number 8, Chad, at number 7, my seventh favorite movie of 2024, I have Dune Part 2, which I think for a lot of people might be their favorite movie so far of the year. And I can understand that. It's not my favorite movie, but it's one of my favorites. And there's a lot about that I like. I do think this is a superior sequel to the first one. I had some issues with the first one, not when it came to its spectacle, not when it came to its brilliant uses. You talk about CGI. The CGI here in this movie looks so great, both in Part 2 and in Part 1. And just the look of this world, I just like, wow, there's so much attention to detail. It feels lived in. It feels interesting. I want to learn more about it. But my biggest issue with Dune Part 1, and it carries into a certain extent for Part 2, but my biggest issue with Dune Part 1 is that I never really felt like I had a connection with these characters. You know, they all kind of talk in a similar monotone-esque way. We didn't get as much depth as I would have liked. Now, again, one could argue, like, oh, that was Part 1. This is Part 2. It's like, I understand that, but if you're making a movie that's 2 hours long, you gotta give me something. There are certain characters that stood out. I really liked Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho. He was fun. But there were so many other people that I struggled to connect with. I didn't particularly like the villains. I loved the look of, the Harkonnens and all that. Very nefarious. I'm a huge Stellan Skarsgård fan. Batista too, and just the way their culture looks, and there's their pale skin, no bald, no eyebrows, no body hair, and just their black armor. It's like, wow. I have no issues with the aesthetic, the production values, the music is exceptional. All that. At a technical level, I think the movie, you can make, it's a technical marvel, it's a technical masterpiece. But a lot of my issues have to do with probably the source material. And so there's a lot of things I appreciate. But I didn't love the movie like other people did. Now, Part 2, I still have some of those issues. I still feel like there are some characters that weren't given enough depth. Some characters that were brought in that felt kind of like afterthoughts. Like, oh, you're getting Florence Pugh, you're getting Christopher Walken. They're going to be the Emperor and the Princess of the universe. And it's like, you barely do anything with them. It's like, okay, cool. We're going to more of the Harkonnens. And I think Austin Butler is great. Him and Javier Bardem, who also plays Stilgar, who's I think our favorite zealot in fiction now at this point. The son of he's like, oh, he's so humble. Of course the Messiah would say that that's why he's the Messiah. It's like shit like that's hilarious. But Austin Butler as Fade Ratha Harkonnen was wonderful. His introduction was great in Getty Prime. Loved the look of Getty. Again, no issues with the aesthetic of these movies. And I loved him. I wanted to see more of him. He doesn't come until like the first hour, end of the first hour. So there's that. And all the sandworms looks great. I just wanted more. I wanted more from the story. But thankfully, you have a number of characters like Paul Muad'Dib. He gets more to do, which I liked. Timothy Chalamet gets more to do. Rebecca Ferguson gets more to do. Josh Brolin, I think, also is a stand. I liked him in the film quite a bit. Zendaya. If you guys were upset that Zendaya didn't have a lot of screen time in the original movie, even though she was all over the marketing, she gets a lot here. We spent a lot of time with Chani, as she's called. And yeah, I mean, it's a film that I think is absolutely gorgeous, and people should look at it as like, hey, if you want to be able to bring a fictional world to life, especially a sci-fi world that feels like it has thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of history, you should look at this because it felt that way. I just wanted to learn. I want to get more intimate with it. But at the same time, there's a lot to like about it. I'd watched it not too long ago. I watched it like a few weeks ago. Just be like, let me watch this again. And I still really liked it. But I still have some of my complaints. But still, an entertaining movie nonetheless, and one that I think a lot of people will have on their best of list this year. Best of the decade, probably. And I understand as to why. I get it. And I have a lot of respect for the movie. Moving on from number 7. Moving on to 6, chap. The last of my bottom 5. At number 6, my 6th best movie, favorite movie of 2024, at least for right now, A Quiet Place Day 1, which I just saw this last week. And, of course, is the third film in the franchise. It's a spinoff. It's not A Quiet Place Part 3. We're not following the Abbott family. Instead, This is a sequel prequel. It focuses on Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn. Lupita Nyong'o, she's playing this terminally ill woman who witnesses the early stages of the alien invasion across the world from these monsters that have incredibly sensitive hearing. And they go out of their way to attack anything that makes a loud noise, bludgeoning them to death, ripping them apart, grabbing those butt cheeks and just tearing them. And I ended up really enjoying this film. I kind of look at it in the same way I look at like Aliens, where, you know, you have the first movie, in the case Quiet Place Day One. It's very small, it's very intimate, focusing just on a handful of characters, you know, and of course your budget's limited, so you're not going to be able to show the creatures as often as you can, but still great, terrifying, you know, thrilling. And this movie, it's like, okay, we're going to expand this world even more, we're going to make it big, and now we're going to have tens, hundreds of these things run around, just decimating the population of New York City, where the majority of this movie takes place. And the spectacle and how they use it is wonderful. The CGI has never looked better in this series. Oh, it looked pretty good, obviously, in the first one, but it gets better and better and better. And so when you see all these creatures like moving around in broad daylight, it still really works. But what I most like about this movie, and it's something that I realized, and I talked about this in my review, the reason why I think the Quiet Place franchise is, I mean, honestly, at this point, like one of the most commercially and critically successful creature feature franchises of all time. I think the reason why these movies work so much for me is that they have that heart. You actually really care about these characters. Of course, there's plenty of horror movies where you have characters that are just there to be meat, you know, they're goofy and you kill them in, you know, funny ways. And like, that's great. There's plenty of horror movies that like that I love. But these movies, they make you care about these people, and they did a great job, especially between Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn, who are two characters who would have ordinarily never come across each other's paths, but because of this event, they do. And they share a connection, and they bring out each other's humanity in a really interesting way. And they have these intimate moments, not like, you know, like, I love you, not like that. It's not like a romantic angle. And I like that they found the will to survive. That's what it was. Despite everything that was being thrown at them, even before the alien invasion, like, you had these characters, they had that renewed sense of survival. And I thought that was handled very well. And I like the ending of this movie quite a bit. And it makes me excited for the rest of this franchise. We're going to get part 3 supposedly next year. And so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I thought this spinoff was very good. Very, very good. But moving on from number 6, Chad. Now we're in the top 5 at this point. Starting with my 5th best movie of 2024, 5th favorite movie of 2024. And this one shocked me. I had no excitement for this film whatsoever. Matter of fact, I was talking shit about it. But I saw the film, and I ate a huge slice of crow, huge slice of humble pie. Hell, I ate the fucking pie itself, Chad. All that crow, all that pie. And that movie was The First Omen. Directed by Arkasha Stevenson. This is the 6th film in the Omen franchise, and also a prequel sequel, taking place before the events of the original Omen, so it's a period piece. And it is honestly the best film in the franchise since the original film. And it has a great cast of people, led by Nell Tiger Free, who's an actress I'm becoming increasingly more interested in. But, you know, we learn more about her. She's this nun in training, and she comes upon this conspiracy which involves the birth of the Antichrist, right? Which the whole Omen franchise is about. You know, the birth of the Antichrist, the fostering of it till he's able to, you know, conquer the world for his father Satan. Hail Satan, all that. And this movie has great characters, really creepy sequences, some scenes, some moments that, at least at this point, are some of my favorite scenes that I've seen all year in a horror film. There's some graphic shit. A lot of birthing movies, chat. A lot of birthing horror movies this year. We also had Sydney Sweeney's and Immaculate. I think this is even better than Immaculate, though I know a lot of people really like this film. But it it just, unlike so many of the other sequels in the franchise, there's some I like. I like The Omen too. Third one is at that point it's like, no, thank you. Then you have the other ones, of course. You have the remake, which was terrible. But it just, outside of maybe like a handful of jump scares, like a handful, it doesn't indulge in the horror tropes that you so often see with so many legacy sequels. So it's like, we're just going to give people the thing they want. Like, I actually appreciate the restraint in this movie and how they were adamant about showing new things. They expanded on the lore of Damien, of The Omen, how it all came to be, and not in a dumb way. So often it's like, when you explain too much, like for the case of the Alien franchise, like the Prometheus Alien Covenants, like the more you talk, like, no, you're taking away the mystique. They actually added to it, and they made it more interesting. And actually, maybe it did a thing a sequel is supposed to do, or what a prequel is supposed to do. It makes you want to watch the original film again. It's like, oh shit, now you have this additional context. How does that kind of change your perception of what happens in the next movie? And that's what this movie does. And I really liked it, and I was shocked at how good this movie is. It was, I think commercially it didn't do very well. Critically, it did very well. And I hope because of that, because it was such a surprise, this director is able to do some more stuff. I'd love to see what else they're going to do. But yeah, wow, what a shock. I would never have thought that the sixth entry in the Omen franchise, a sequel prequel, would be number 5 on my best movies list of 2024, or any year for that matter. So I really liked it. Highly recommend it. Some good horror films so far this year, chat. There's some bad ones, but that'd be for another day. But number 4, my fourth best movie of 2024 is Challengers, which is a movie I was really looking forward to because the marketing for this looked really cool. Challengers, a.k.a. Brother Husbands, as Nia Brownie calls it. This is directed by Luca Guadagnino, who has done some interesting films in the past. They did the Suspiria remake. They did a really good movie I recommend that I'd watch. I did, I believe, an audio video commentary for it, and perhaps a review for it as well. It's called Bones and All, which stars Timothée Chalamet, a number of other recognizable actors, where it follows these ghouls, kind of like vampiric ghouls that go around the country just kind of like eating people in the 80s, I want to say. Good movie. And with this film, it centers on a love triangle between these tennis players. You have this savant tennis star played by Zendaya, who gets injured, earlier in the film, and she can't do it, so she begins coaching one of these other people. Eventually becomes her husband. But you have these two guys who are played by Josh O'Connor and Mike Faist, who are also obsessed with her and also obsessed with each other. And well, you get a lot of hot, steamy, scenes in this film, a lot of sexual situations. But you just follow, and it's kind of like told out of order too, but you just follow their lives and how their perceptions of one another changes over time. And I really liked it for that. I mean, it's just about these fucked up people in a fucked up relationship, and all the weird, hot, sweaty, sexy things they do to each other, and all the shitty, manipulative things they do with each other in between all that. And it's a really cool, just dramatic sports movie. I mean, it could have actually worked even without the tennis of it all. Actually, I think you can make an argument the tennis stuff might be the weakest aspect. They do these weird first person. They just would not always first person, but they do these. No, it is first person. Ball perspective. That's what it is. You see from the perspective of the ball, and the camera's like twisting around and stuff. It's like, oh, it's kind of disorienting. Didn't care for that all that much. That's my one criticism of the film. But all the relationship stuff between the characters, the dramatic tension, the changing of their relationships over time, that is great. And so tennis is almost like an afterthought. It could have been anything really in the movie. And it also, I mean, both O'Connor and Face, I think, do a great job. But Zendaya is the star in this movie, and people that were asking, like, for the longest time, is like, I want to. And she's been great. She's been great in a lot of things. But I think a lot of people have wanted, like, okay, what's going to be her big, like, really dramatic role to show off her chops, to show off her range. This is that movie. And so if you wanted to see that from her, check out this film. She's going to give it to you. And it makes me excited for what she's going to eventually do in the future. Again, this is another movie that I think had a lot of good word of mouth and pretty good reviews, but not a lot of people saw. I think it's probably in VOD right now. So I highly recommend it. I think you guys really like it. Check it out. Check it out. A very underrated, great film from this year. But here we go, chat. We're getting to the top 3. Number 3, this probably doesn't come as any surprise to you guys. I have Late Night with the Devil. Now, I've already, talked about several horror films that I've really enjoyed this year. Some on my honorable mentions list, some on my top 10 list. But Late Night with the Devil it's high in my list just because it's very unique and it's very, very smart. It stars David Dastmalchian, which you may not know the name, but you've definitely seen him. He's a character actor. He's been around for quite some time. He showed up in some huge, high-profile projects, in Marvel movies and DC movies. He's the Polka Dot Man. He's in Denis Villeneuve's movies and Blade Runner 2049, Dune, of course. And across all these films and all these other movies I could possibly mention, The Dark Knight. I think for a lot of people, we discovered him in The Dark Knight. He plays the Joker henchman who's being interrogated by Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent, and with the gun pointed at his head. He's consistently great in everything he appears in. He's always, even if the movie itself is whatever, he's always really, really good. And because he's so good in these supporting roles, it made me go I want to see this guy in a lead role. I want to see him carry a film, and that's what he does here. He plays a 1970s late night talk show host whose show is not doing well in the ratings. And he wants to bump up those numbers. And in order to do so, he promotes this shocking episode of his late night show on October 31st, on Halloween 1977. And he brings on all these people, brings on this girl who has allegedly been possessed by this entity. And chaos ensues. The look of this movie, I think, is so great. So much of the film, not all of it, but so much of the movie looks like a 1970s telecast of a late night show. They really adhere to that aesthetic throughout. The production design, I think, is very good. In terms of just the look, the clothing, it feels very much of the period. They do have some sequences where it's it's off camera, so they're kind of shooting it in black and white, and you're getting, another side of these people, these characters. Certain mysteries are revealed along the way. Some people are presenting themselves in this way, but it's oh shit, this is what they're really about here. And so a lot of great twists and turns. If I really have any issue with the movie, is that there's occasionally some special effects that look cheap, but maybe that's intentional because they wanted to kind of adhere to that 70s look. But, I want to point that out because I think other people have pointed it out too. And I understand that criticism, but everything else about it, all the performances are great, especially David Dastmalchian. He does such a great job. And again, it's such a unique horror film. Just a late night talk show gone awry, where, demons start ripping people apart and twisting. I mean, people's heads splitting open, heads are spinning all the way around, people just falling, down into the, glass tables and stuff. I'm hell yeah, I'm all about that. A little bit of body horror in there, in there too. Wonderful lighting throughout as well. So yeah, great movie. Outside of maybe a little mixed on an occasional special effect, everything else is fantastic in this movie. But it's not my number 2, chat. My second best movie of 2024, I don't think this comes as a surprise to anyone, Inside Out 2. Of course, this is the latest Pixar movie, obviously a sequel to 2015's Inside Out, which was already a great movie. Recently rewatched it with you guys, and so I had a greater appreciation, for the film, but going into Inside Out 2, because it'd been quite some time since I'd seen the original movie. But this takes place a few years after the events of the original one. Riley is now a teenager, and so she's going through puberty, and her emotions of joy and sadness and anger and fear and disgust are trying to deal with that, but they also have to deal with new emotions in the process. New emotions like anxiety, boredom, envy, and embarrassment. And as these emotions describe themselves as, or at least anxiety describes herself. And you got a great voice cast too. Obviously, you have a lot of the returning voices from the previous film. Amy Poehler, of course, returns. Phyllis Smith, Lewis Black, Diane Lane, Kyle MacLachlan, Mindy Kaling, and Bill Hader have been replaced. They didn't come back as Disgust and Fear, respectively. But who they get to voice them is very good. Tony Hale and Lisa LaPierre. But the new emotions, such as anxiety, voiced by Maya Hawke, explains that, well, now Riley's getting older. She has more complicated emotions. She has complicated more feelings. So you guys are redundant. And so that's what, causes the conflict in this film, where you have the older emotions trying to wrest control from these newer emotions, or anxiety, who is planning. I love how they explain the emotions, because people are like, well, shouldn't that be fear? Isn't fear connected to anxiety? Fear is Riley's fear is for the things that she sees in front of her at that very moment. That's how fear activates. Anxiety is the fears of the future, the fears that she can't see, or that maybe she can perceive later on, happening later on. And I love that explanation. It's also a fantastic showcase of just anxiety in general in real life. Like, we see Pixar's version of a panic attack, and it's great. Someone who has dealt with anxiety throughout a lot of my life, to see how that was represented, didn't feel exploitive at all. Actually, it felt just very earnest and very honest, and I loved it. And it's of course, it's beautiful looking. They have some amazing animated sequences. I like that so many of the characters are together. There's a ton of other new people introduced. I don't even want to say. There's video game characters. There's 2DS characters introduced in the movie. There's another emotion too. A lot of great surprises they hit in all the trailers, and I don't want to ruin those for you guys. But when they show up, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And it's obviously it's very, very funny, but man, it handles all the drama very well. All these sad sequences incredibly well, and it has a very strong ending, especially in regards to joy and anxiety. And the new voice cast does a great job of Tony Hale, Lisa LaPierre, Ayo Edebiri, and Maya Hawke. Wonderful. And one of Pixar's best sequels in quite some time. Probably since Toy Story 4, which I also really like. But yeah, if you love the first Inside Out, you're probably going to really enjoy the sequel. I certainly did. And I imagine, this movie is now the highest grossing film of the year so far. It's made over $1 billion. So you bet your bottoms that they're going to make a third film. And we could potentially have another amazing Pixar trilogy, which I would love that, because really the only other amazing Pixar trilogy, at least right now, is Toy Story. And I would even argue quadrilogy personally, because I love Toy Story 4, despite my initial misgivings of that movie. So yeah, I'm hoping they can execute. And there's so many things directions they can go in with Riley as she's getting older. And I also appreciate they didn't do the whole. Because I think there was thinking, all right, well, they're going to have it where she's going through puberty and it's going to be about a boy. And they actually do that with one of the shorts. They don't go in that direction. They kind of change it up a little bit. How she's dealing with her old friends and new friends and school and everything. And I like that. And how anxiety can mess up your perception of those things and how you handle and conduct yourself. That was great. So Inside Out 2 is at number 2. But at number 1, and I don't think this comes as any surprise to those of you that know me, those who checked out my review for this film. But at number 1, my best movie so far of 2024 is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Now, that's a long-ass title. A very long title, but it's part of a great franchise. I think you can make a very good argument that the modern Planet of the Apes trilogy is one of the greatest trilogies of all time. Certainly one of the greatest trilogies of the 21st century. I think it's up there with a lot of excellent trilogies. Lord of the Rings. But what they were able to do with those first 3 movies was great. To just breathe new life into the Apes franchise. You got to remember, too, people were not excited for that Rise Planet of the Apes at all, because we were coming off of the Tim Burton movie, which, despite making money, was just so reviled and hated and mocked that they just abandoned plans to do a direct sequel. And then they eventually did the 2011 film, at first with Rupert Wyatt, who was the director. And of course, Andy Serkis as Caesar, instead of showing it from the human's perspective, as it had often been done in some of the earlier films, though not always the case. I like that we saw so much of this world, and throughout the sequels, from the ape's perspective, from Caesar, the rise of this new civilization as humanity was nearly eradicated by this virus, which caused the apes to get intelligent. And that whole story with Caesar and Rise and Dawn and War and all the other supporting was wonderful trilogy, and they couldn't end it there. But there's still a lot of potential, and of course 20th Century Fox was sold to Disney. I think people had a lot of worries and misgivings about, like, is the quality going to be up to snuff in the original movies? Are they going to make it as dark and dramatic as those previous films? And people were worried they weren't. But the movie came out, and I feel like they did that. I love that it wasn't like, we're just going to tell the next story in the Caesar legacy or whatever, even though the way they kind of do. But it takes place, for the most part, 300 years after the events of Caesar. And we're following all these different little ape tribes and civilizations. And now that, they have become the dominant species of the planet. And what's so interesting, the thing that I really like when it came to the world building was that Caesar is now passed on into legend. He's a mythological figure. He's a religious figure. He's the Jesus Christ. He's the monkey Jesus of these apes 300 years later. And some apes have heard of him, others have not. Other people, as they often do. I mean, I love that this is like an obvious allegory to religion. And how religion proliferated across the world, but people had different interpretations of certain things, and things change over time. This stuff wasn't written down, and so people can make up whatever they want to make up. And that's what never really happens in this movie. You have a new villain in the character of Proximus Caesar, which literally means next Caesar, which I think is very funny, who has taken Caesar's teaching, has bastardized them, and is trying to create a kingdom where he wants to create a kingdom so that apes will never go back to being in cages, where they will most assuredly be the dominant species on the planet. And he begins using Caesar's teaching to subjugate other apes, enslaving them to be a part of his kingdom. And that's inevitably where we obviously first meet like Noah, who is someone who had never even heard of Caesar. His village is inevitably attacked, and he's trying to save the survivors who are abducted, and he comes to meet a character in that film, Rocco, is an orangutan who teaches him the true lessons and teachings of Caesar. And what a fantastic character and relationship in that movie. We have a human character and the character of May, who is, not your damsel in distress or anything like that. They how they handle her and her relationship with Noah, I think, is very interesting in the film. They just don't feel like, another Caesar or another, Nova-esque character or George Taylor. I really like that. They went in a different direction. They didn't take the easy path. And it makes the relationship, I think, more complicated and sets it up for some even more interesting things like later down the line. But I loved this new world. I loved how Caesar's teachings have shaped it, and how you have different apes and how they perceive him and his legacy. It also looks gorgeous. The CGI in this movie across the board is gorgeous. I mean, the apes movies have always looked pretty good. They've always gotten better with each entry, but here it's just like, God, this looks excellent. Like the mocap on all of them is wonderful, and there's some really cool action sequences. There's a lot of conversations where there's a lot of scenes that people just having conversation with each other. They're just talking, and I personally like that. I think a big criticism of this movie was the pacing for some people. I wasn't really bothered by that because I found whatever they were talking about was great, and they were just furthering developing their characters and deepening their relationships. And some bad things happen to some of these characters in this movie, and you're like, no, and you felt something. And yeah, I've highlighted my appreciation for Kevin Durant, who, of course, was in Abigail, and here he is as Proximus Caesar, and he's great. I mean, the Apes franchise in general, from all the original one, from Dr. Zaius to Koba, has had a long, rich history of fantastic villains in the series, and Proximus Caesar is never one of those guys. I just love it. What a wonderful day. And the perfect representation of a tyrannical leader. A tyrannical leader who is so into his own bullshit and thinks like, hey, what I'm doing is right and I'm here for everybody, but he's just really so selfish. But he just has these intimate moments where he's not like barking orders or being so over the top. Sometimes he's like going to Noah, it's like, listen, man, you're smart. Like, that's the thing about Noah. Like, he's not like built or anything. He loses every fight he's pretty much in. But like, I like that Proxima Caesar recognized in the film's like, you're fucking smart. I need more smart apes. And he's like, he's showing him around. He's like, sure, what do you see? He's like, I see enslaved apes. He's like, no, you see kingdom. He's like, I don't want us to go back in the cages. I don't want this to happen again. I was like, I really liked his scenes. And even though he was a bad guy and he was doing really evil shit, I like that he had these moments where he felt so human. He's obsessed with history. He loves Roman history. So of course he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to style myself off of not only, of course, Caesar, who is connected to Roman history because of his name, but just that whole vibe of it. And so he's more human than you think. I really love this movie so much, and that's why it's my favorite film so far of 2024. I think it's the best movie of 2024. I imagine people have their own lists, and they have their own number one favorite, at least so far. But that's my list, my honorable mentions, and I'm glad I was able to review so many of these things. If you guys want a more robust review of all these individual movies, then I highly recommend checking out my reviews on YouTube for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and Inside Out 2 and Late Night the Devil Challengers, all of them, including my honorable mentions, all up there right now. So feel free to check those out. But yeah, those are my best movies, favorite movies of 2024. What about you guys?
5 minutes later.
Of course, guys, my number one is Hitman. The rest is no particular order. Our challengers, Late Night of the Devil, Dune 2, Love Lies Bleeding, First Omen, Quiet Place Day 1, Apes, Civil War, and Fears. We got a lot of the same things. A lot of the same things on our list. Katrina, Late Night of the Devil, The First Omen so far. Nice. Good movies. Let's brother husbands. Oh, man. Ace Rock, Walking in Work for You as the Emperor. Paul Muad'Dib is alive in the southern regions of Arrakis. Watching that on IMAX. Oh, I'm sure. Sangaip. Oh, Chris, Secure Spa, great salutation. Hope you're living and prospering. Good to see you. I'm sorry I missed you there. I was going on my spiel about these movies I really liked. Blank Frank, good to see you. Lasan Al Jaoust, I like that. Yeah, people are saying, damn it, 7, yeah. This is a prime example of failing upwards. He is. Good to see him, by the way, Deadpool. He's straight up, he fails. He's bad. Like, he's a lot of talk. I'll do this for you. I'll do that for you. It'll be great. But he kind of sucks. But I like that about him. I like that he's a fuck-up. I think of Dr. Dementis as what would have happened if Mad Max completely lost. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Matter of fact, one of the shorts that I did, it was actually about Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and how George Miller... Like, you have it where Anti-Entity and Max, like, have a respect for each other. But he said how if Max chose to go with the children to rebuild, like, civilization in Sydney, then he would have become, like, an Anti-Entity who really started out with these grand ambitions and these altruistic intentions. She never becomes a warlord. She becomes a dictator over this community because she's like, the only way to make this thing work is I have absolute power. And she starts making all of these decisions and exploiting people. And she feels like, and George Miller says that's what happened to Max if he went there with those people and become like their fucking god because they all worship him, but he chooses not to. It's like, oh, it's really interesting. And so I can see that where, yeah, Dementis, he too is that character where, I mean, they even say like, he lost a number of people that were very close to him, and he's become this very selfish person because he feels like that's the only way you can truly survive in this world. I'm doing this for you and me, and it works. Actually, I didn't see a lot yet, but Furiosa is my fave so far. I have a bunch on my list too to watch though, which will be Vacation Work. Nice. Let's see you guys saying here. I don't want to miss anybody. Haven't seen a lot of movies yet. Yeah, no, there's plenty to see. I think there's plenty to see. Exuma was incredible. Korean horror. Oh, I didn't see that, Ace Rock. Exuma. Yeah, interesting. Miss Sycamore, The First Omen, Dune 2, Lane of the Devil. Can't remember the rest of the moment. Yeah, we got a lot of the same stuff. Right, just gonna have to get my list together, but yeah, a lot of those are on there. Yeah. I don't think anything I put on my list is like too controversial. Maybe we'd all move them around and stuff, but I think pretty reasonable lists. Haven't seen many movies so far, says Clown Freaks. Late Night of the Devil and Abigail were so good. Agreed. Brought both up. Yeah. He had the spice, so the place he could hide it in his ass. Love Lies Bleeding of Kristen Stewart is my favorite so far. Good movie. He also feels like a crack mirror version of Max in some way. Oh, yeah. Totally. Sirius Block really loved Dune and Furiosa. I was also just laughed my ass off during Bad Boys 4 yesterday. Yeah, it was one of my honorable mentions. I like the film. I wish I loved the new Ace movie as much as you, but I felt the same about it as you do about Dune. That's fair. Okay. Which sucks because it was my most specific of the year. Fair enough. I think the one criticism I've heard consistently about Apes is that a lot of people had issues with the pacing. I didn't really have that much issue, but, I understand. Mentioned earlier about the censorship in the scene, and the first one was hilarious in their logic. Yeah, I'll eventually I'll do like a spoiler review, get more intimate details of the first home, and I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't seen it because not a lot of people have been able to see it. But I hope people check it out because I think it was really good. But yeah, Chad, there you go. And so tomorrow I will be doing my worst movies of 2024, which is always a very fun list to do, talking shit about these films I've already talked shit about. Yeah, I was working on that today, matter of fact. I think I got the top 10 ready, but I think I have some honorable mentions. Actually, you know what? I don't have the top 10 ready. I have all the films listed. I just need to order them. But I think I have an idea of what I'll have on the top 10 list. So you have that to look forward to. So that should be super, super fun. 30 minutes of farming. Oh, my God. I forgot I'd watch Rebel Moon Part 2. I was like, oh, yeah, that movie came out. Because I was, like, going through my reviews in case I missed anything. Because that's the thing what happens. Like, when you watch, like, a lot of bad movies, there'll be some that, like, that stick out. Because people just keep referring to them or bring them up, but they'll be like, "Oh shit, I did see this." Now then it comes rushing back. So I was like, "Oh yeah," like Terra. I keep forgetting I've seen Terra. I was like, "Oh yeah, Terra." So, my least favorite so far. Yeah. That's right. Oh, Alec, you just saw Maxine. Oofa. How was it? Was it good? I also love the first Home Immaculate and Ministry. Forgot about those. Yeah. Drive Away Doll. So I did not see that one. That's one I missed. All right. So Romu, Imaginary Nights, Swim, Man and Web, Throw Dart said that's the order. Well, you'll have to see. But yeah, Edgy's was Rebel Moon. See, I forgot about Rebel Moon. I was like, oh yeah, that movie. That movie fucking terrible. Terrible film. And those director's cuts, I guess, are coming out August? I wonder if people really care. They probably do. Rebel Moon was so bad, it didn't leave. No, that's the thing. It didn't leave an impression. Well, it just borrows. I mean, that's the thing. Like, oh, listen, you have plenty of franchises that have borrowed from each other, stolen from each other. Of course, like Star Wars stole from Dune, right? But, those movies are memorable. They have even the stuff that they steal from. It's like they still stood out and they were fun. But Rebel Moon, it steals from all these other things that you've seen before, fantasy movies, sci-fi, horror genre, but it doesn't do anything new with them. It doesn't even do anything very interesting with them, stimulating at all. It's just like, the fuck? It's just a slog. That's the flaw. That's the biggest, one of the many flaws, but perhaps the biggest flaw in Rebel Moon is that it just doesn't do anything interesting. And that's the problem. So 2 of those 4, Knightson was the lesser of the 2. Man and Web was, you'll see. There's some other ones too I'd forgotten about. I was like, oh yeah. Oh good, I can't wait for them to extend the farming hall. I wonder, now they're not even the same names, right? They're being called something else. It's like, now it's like Rebel Moon Part 1, like the Blood Chalice, and Rebel Moon Part 2, the Survivors of Dawn. I don't know, some shit like that. I was like, wait, what? Huh? Maxine was aesthetically pleasing without being too in your face about the 80s. It was fun, bloody, and has a great name. Oh, okay, that's good. It's not even a homage to straight plagiarize, yeah. River Moon I have heard being bad, but I imagine coming out in the same year as Dune 2 and seeing how, oh yeah, Dune 2 is only makes, 100%. Yeah, that's right, because they came out pretty close to each other, right? Because Dune was early March, and I think I want to say, like, Rebel Moon was Part 2, that is, was like April? It was like early April, so yeah. That helped. Rebel Moon is like they decided to make a movie from a half-baked, rough draft script. Yep. I mean, Zack Snyder said he started writing these things when he was 12 or 13, and it feels that way. I don't know if they updated the scripts. The only people who care about those extended universe are the Snyder bots. Yeah, Yeah, I guess. Yeah, pretty much at this point. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But here you go, Jay. I'm glad we were able to fit everything in a reasonable amount of time. Sadly, probably no Jackbox. Don't tell Naya. Don't tell Naya.